Hello everyone and welcome to Sipz and Storiez. My name is Elizabeth and in today's video I will be doing my April wrap up. April was a really good reading month for me. I read a number of really great books that will make you think about the meaning of life, all that good stuff. So I loved most of these books with one notable exception, which I can't wait to talk about. So grab your favorite beverage and join me as we discuss these terrific reads. The first book that I read was a reread, of course, of The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I mentioned this in my spring TBR video. I read the Mina Lima edition, which are these beautifully illustrated editions of childhood classics, and it was such a pleasure to reread The Secret Garden. I love this book. It's such a classic, and I find as an adult that I am appreciating these classics a lot more. I'm appreciating what the authors themselves were trying to accomplish with these simple, sweet children's stories, and The Secret Garden is one of those books. There's more meaning to it than what's at the surface. I mean, I think just the lessons of friendship and law of attraction and having a dream and a belief in magic, belief in nature. I think Frances Hodgson Burnett was trying to convey that through a simple children's story, and it's absolutely beautiful. My favorite character in The Secret Garden by far is Susan Sowerby, Dickens' mother. I just love her relationship with all of the children. So beautiful book, and I gave it, of course, 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Ikigai, The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life by Hector Garcia and Francis Morales. Ikigai. And I'm a little late to the party on Ikigai. I first listened to the audiobook, and I loved the audiobook so much that I went out to the library and got the physical hardback copy of this book so I could reread it. And I just love this concept. I've been fascinated with Eastern culture and Eastern religions lately, and the Japanese culture. I swear, when all this is over, Japan is the first place on my bucket list that I want to travel to, because I love the Japanese culture. They just have such an appreciation of nature and life and joy and family and friends. And this concept, Ikigai, is about having a purpose in life. There's a really beautiful graphic that is all over the internet that explains what Ikigai is. It's where your career goals and your passion and your hobbies and what you can do for the world, where it all comes together and gives you a purpose for your life. And in the Japanese culture and in other cultures throughout the world, your Ikigai can change from different parts of your life. So when you're a kid, maybe sports and school can be your Ikigai. When you're an adult, maybe it's family and career. And then when you're older, in your twilight years, maybe it's just being social or having gardening or exercising. So it will change throughout your life. And in this book, the authors, they explore this culture on the island of Okinawa, where they talk to all of these 100-year-old people that are living into their hundreds. And something that they all share in common is their diet is really good. They're very, very social, and they all understand this concept of Ikigai, about having a purpose. So really fascinating book. I don't think I'm explaining it that well, but I really, really enjoyed this book, and I'm so glad I read it this month. The next book that I read was Creativity, Inc., The Story of Pixar by Ed Catmull. I've been meaning to read this book forever. I think it was published back in 2014, and since that time it has been on my TBR. It is probably one of the most famous business books in recent years. I think a lot of people like me are fascinated with Pixar just because I love all the great storytelling that Pixar produces. That new movie, Soul, I loved it. And I always find that their movies, there's a little something more spiritual about their movies. Like, they get it. Like WALL-E, there's basically no talking in WALL-E, but I could just cry when I think about WALL-E. Or Finding Nemo, right? Or the existential crisis that the toys have in Toy Story. So I just wanted to learn more about their storytelling process and how they came to be. And this book was so good. So Ed Catmull was one of the founders of Pixar, along with Steve Jobs, who was the business guy, and then John Lasseter, who is the creative storyteller. And it was just fascinating, their journey, starting the company from just a small technology company to becoming this huge, very powerful studio, to being bought out by Walt Disney. It's just great. Plus, he talks a lot about how to establish a creative culture in your business. So I think even if you are like me, a YouTuber or a writer or a teacher or a mother, anyone that's trying to create this culture of creativity should read this book. You don't have to be a CEO. It's absolutely fascinating, whatever business you're in. In fact, I think this is the best book about what Napoleon Hill calls the mastermind principle, of that you can just accomplish so much more as a team than you can as an individual. So just the way he describes just the culture at Pixar, really, really fascinating. I loved this and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. There is one caveat to this book. John Lasseter has since been booted out of Walt Disney for some harassment allegations that have come his way. And you can kind of see it in the book, how Ed Catmull was in such fascination with him. He thought he could do no wrong. So he kind of became like godlike a little bit. And he talks a lot about Steve Jobs too, and the arrogance of Steve Jobs, especially when he was young. And I think he spotted it in Steve Jobs, but he didn't spot it in John Lasseter. So a lot of women have come forward since and talked about that. You know what? Pixar was good if you were a guy, but not so great if you were a woman. And John Lasseter would steal your ideas and not invite you into meetings, and you'd get booted off of movies. So a lot of women have come forward and said that they were booted off of being directors at Pixar. I just take that as kind of a postscript to this book. And Ed Catmull himself says, he's like, I don't know what the challenge in the future is going to be. That was the challenge, unfortunately, for Pixar. I don't think these allegations diminish from this book, but I just wanted to put that out there because Pixar is not a perfect company, like he says, and I just think that's obvious. Good book. Glad I read it. 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read, switching gears just a little bit again, is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. This book is kind of loosely based on the life of Buddha. It's not about Buddha, Gautama Buddha, but Buddha was also called Siddhartha. This book is about a fictional character named Siddhartha who follows a spiritual journey similar to the Buddha. In fact, he does meet the actual Buddha, the actual enlightened one in the book. And it's really fascinating. I really enjoyed this because Hermann Hesse himself is German. He wrote this during the 1920s. So this is probably the most famous Western perspective of Eastern culture in literature. And it was really, really good. I enjoyed it. There was a lot of really quote-worthy passages in it. Judging by all the book darts that I inserted, if you can see, for only being 100 pages long, there are so many beautiful passages. And it does make you think about the meaning of life. It follows Siddhartha's journey from when he's growing up with his family, then he goes off on his own into the wilderness to seek enlightenment, and he renounces all possessions, then he meets the Buddha, then he goes back into the world and he gets involved with a woman named Kamala. So yes, Kamala, the significance of that name was not lost on me, but he becomes a business person, he gets caught up in what the Buddhists called samsara, and he ultimately returns to enlightenment. So really fascinating book. I did think Siddhartha was kind of a jerk sometimes, like he was kind of annoying. So I'm not saying you're gonna love these characters, but just the writing was incredible. In fact, a lot of this feels like poetry, and they do recommend that you read this aloud if at all possible, because you will be just enraptured like I was by the beauty of the language. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. So speaking of Siddhartha, a book that is in the similar vein to Siddhartha is On the Road by Jack Kerouac. In fact, it was recommended in Siddhartha as supplementary reading material, a book that follows a similar spiritual journey. And I have been meaning to read On the Road forever. In fact, I picked up this really cute Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition in Seattle last summer, and I just love how it looks like a comic book. So the physicality of this book, the deckled edges, love it. The story, not so much. As someone that I just kind of had these preconceived notions about Jack Kerouac, about this group of Beat generation, Neal Cassady, Allen Ginsberg, I'm disappointed in these people. I don't think that they were really good role models. I think their lives were interesting, certainly. But wow, just the way that they abandoned children, the way they abandoned women to go on this road trip, I could just wring their necks. So this book is not about Jack Kerouac. It's just loosely based on his real life travels with Neal Cassady. So it's about a character named Sal Dean Moriarty. And he starts off like as a student in New York, and then he goes on all these road trips throughout America, like back and forth from New York to San Francisco and San Francisco to New York and all over America to see his friends. And that part of the book I really enjoyed. So if you have that wanderlust spirit, you will like this. Just the fact that in those days, you know, in the 40s, the 30s, 40s, you could just hop a freight train. You could just hitchhike across America. That's fascinating to me. So I did like that tone of the book, just that wanderlust, the road trip aspect of the book. What I did not like about the book, as I said before, were the characters. And if you read the reviews on this, a lot of people do not like Jack Kerouac. They don't like his writing. They did not like the characters like I did. I thought this book was very misogynistic in certain spots. In fact, he's involved with a Spanish girl, and he just admits that he left her because she was Spanish. He talks in one part, he's very racist. He talks about how he wishes he was black because his whole life would be perfect if he was black. And you're just like, oh, I cannot believe you just went there. He's very homophobic, so there are some scenes that are just not great. So I think from our perspective, parts of this book are horrifying. You just have to remember this was written, let's see when this was written, in the 1940s. In the 1950s. So this was written in the 50s. Just keep that in mind. But oh my God, this book, I just had to stop it. Right now I'm at a scene where Dean leaves his pregnant wife and his daughter to go on this other road trip, and then they end up going down to Mexico, and I don't even want to tell you what happens in Mexico because it's horrible. So yeah, did not like this book. I would give the characters 1 star. I would give Jack Kerouac's writing 4, almost 5 stars in certain spots. Like, I hate when people are geniuses, but then I don't like them. So that's what this is. Like, really smart guy. Just hate this book though. Giving it, I can't even rate this one. Alrighty, the last book I'd like to discuss to just get the Jack Kerouac out of my system, flush him out of my reading system, is A Girl from Yam Hill by Beverly Cleary. So obviously I read this because, you know, the legend Beverly Cleary passed away recently at 104. So assuming her life was very Ikigai. She led a long, happy life. And this is the first part of her memoirs. It takes place from her childhood growing up on her farm in Oregon called Yam Hill Farm. Then it talks about when she lived in Portland as a young girl up into her high school years. This takes place from when she's born to when she graduated high school. And so just learning about Portland at that time, fascinating, because so many of her books, Ramona, Henry Huggins, Beezus, they're set in Portland. And yes, I really think now, having read this, Beverly Cleary is Ramona. She based the character of Ramona on her real life, because growing up on this farm, she was very tomboyish. She was an only child. She was very spunky, very curious about life. So Beverly Cleary is Ramona. I absolutely love this book so much that I got the second book. So I'm just telling you right now that if you want to read Girl from Yam Hill, just go ahead and buy My Own 2 Feet, which is the second half of her memoirs, because you're going to immediately want to go buy this book. This takes place from when she graduates high school to when she goes to college at Berkeley in California. It talks about her becoming a librarian, and that's what inspired her to become a writer, because kids didn't have books that reflected them at that time in the 1930s and 40s. And then it talks about her starting her career as a writer. So I just got it in the mail yesterday, and look how far I already am. Oh, I love this. These books make me so happy, and a great way to round out my reading month. Definitely 5 out of 5 stars. All right, everyone, thank you for joining me for my April wrap up. I loved all of these books except for On the Road. They were fantastic and I can't recommend them highly enough. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.